You witness revolution. You see how people, small groups of people, can move larger numbers and change the views and how the country acts. You know, I forget who it was who said it's only 5 or 10% of the people that can change everything, if organized and together. Because most people just sit back and don't do anything. But when you see real organizers, activists, who are fighting for a good cause, it's just impressive. I was very proud to be a part of it.
The third thing that Tom Hayden thought would come out of this is that it would heighten people's political consciousness. And I think this is happening to us all here. But a consciousness which is really heightened is a consciousness which takes action.
In Chicago, and we're going to grow in Chicago until Tom is out of jail, until Wolf is out of jail, until the Indian who is walking down the street is out of jail, and until it is safe for the people again.
The movement's belief is that what we want corresponds to the real needs of everyone who's oppressed, that there is a sense in which we are the people. And that's hard for us to believe, and harder to work from. We came to Chicago fearing isolation.
What do we want? Revolution! When? Now! What do we want?
The murderer slips the net, but a few blocks away, a man is captured.
Demonstrators protest U.S. involvement in the Vietnam War.
Martin Luther King was shot and was killed tonight in Memphis.
Senator Kennedy has been shot.
And in Chicago, youth fought to disrupt political process. Campuses everywhere were rocked by violence.
What do we want? Revolution! When? Now! What do we want? Revolution! When? Now! When? Now! When? Now!
And I will not accept the nomination of my party for another term as your president.
Chicago and demonstrate their unhappiness with the way America was headed.
6 days of rioting in a Negro section of Los Angeles left behind scenes reminiscent of war-torn cities. More than 100 square blocks were decimated by fire and looters, and few buildings were left intact.
There was continuing fear among police departments and authorities of cities that there would be huge riots erupt in their cities. And then Mayor Daley thought Chicago was a prime target. At the same time, he very much wanted the Democratic Convention of 1968 to come to Chicago. And Lyndon Johnson, president, owed him big time for the passage of a number of very important bills, including his strong support for the Civil Rights Bill. It has not been recognized that he really was not uninvolved, that Daley was on the phone with him and other authorities here were on the phone with him, and 2 CIA men on the convention planning committee were known to be direct representatives from the White House.
Mayor, we're so proud of you, and you're so tremendous, and Lady Bird was here, and we placed a call just to tell you that the good Lord is looking over you and guiding you, and you are the one great, courageous, decent thing.
How that would play out in the streets.
Trying to set up or help contribute to a setup in which the energies of the anti-war movement can be unleashed or liberated. We're working for some kind of combination of planning and flexibility.
Dave Dellinger was the consummate pacifist. He had opposed war during World War II. You know, he was a man in his mid-50s at that point, as anti-violence as anyone. And he was part of the national mobilization to end the war, as well as yippie groups, church groups, student groups. It was all together. It was the national mobilization.
Well, we called it the MOB. It was the older generation of pacifists and leftists who saw the Vietnam War as an opportunity to engage in their kind of traditional organizing, which is to build coalitions and turn out the largest number of people possible for a peaceful legal demonstration, in this case against the Vietnam War. There were 3 streams of protest, at least, or 4, that needed to collaborate. 1, the anti-Vietnam mobilization. 2, the hippies had become yippies, were trying to launch a cultural protest against the establishment, and they wanted a giant festival of life for which there needed to be permits for musicians and so on. 3rd, there were the dissident Democrats who were for the Democratic Party and against the war. They fought for a platform, an anti-Vietnam platform at the convention, and they were generally supporters of either Eugene McCarthy or the late Senator Robert Kennedy, who had been killed, of course, that June. There was also, I call it a 4th dimension, which was the people of Chicago themselves, particularly in the African-American community, who really were outraged about many issues in Chicago and wanted to bring their voice to the convention as well. All of these tendencies had people like, in our case, Rennie Davis, who fought very hard, very early for permits, which were denied continually.
May I emphasize that the Federal Bureau of Investigation is as close to you as your nearest telephone. It belongs to you. It seeks to be your protector in all matters within its jurisdiction.
I think that the FBI under J. Edgar Hoover was the shadow government of the United States. They believed that all these movements were communist-led, communist-inspired, and un-American. When a man in a FBI suit comes to you and you're a mayor or you're a politician in Chicago and says, your city is at stake, we have to take over, we have to control everything, you go along. it incites a kind of violent readiness among a police department that already has problems with young people, with black people, with Latinos, all kinds of problems. Ramsey Clark was the Attorney General at the time. His Justice Department, Civil Rights Division, was out in Chicago, was interviewing us, and they sent back reports to Washington saying, deal with these guys. You may not agree with them, but we believe that they want to keep order. They want to have a very large militant protest, but we don't see any evidence of what you're afraid of. But other people say, no. It was really, Mayor Daley was too narrow-minded, and he refused to give the permits, and the Johnson administration had no way to force him to give the permits.
Mayor Daley had mixed motives. I mean, he wanted to present a good face to the world for Chicago. He didn't want to see his convention ruined by angry protesters.
The rumble of spring violence has forecast trouble. The convention hall is fortified, rigged by catwalks patrolled by riflemen. Protest is in the air. Police and National Guard are mobilized.
They mounted a real campaign that Chicago's going to be tough. Chicago, you're not going to get away with anything in Chicago. And a kind of message that civil disobedience won't be tolerated.
And that set up a series of confrontations that ultimately led to a lot of bloodshed.
But you're going to march anyway. Are you expecting trouble?
We expect to march.
Well,
we expect trouble all the time.
We are not going out to fight the cops. I mean, we basically hope that this is going to be a nonviolent situation in this park. However, if the violence comes, we will soak it up.
There were many thousands of young demonstrators, and they certainly anticipated, given Mayor Daley's statements, that there would be a strong police presence in the streets of Chicago. They probably didn't quite contemplate the degree to which there would be confrontations, the violence that would erupt.
Some of the protesters stood up on the embankment and faced the police. The police say in the report, in the Walker report, that they were pelted with missiles and then they broke loose. No one, not me nor any other reporter, none of us saw anything thrown at that point. Somebody told me that up here there may have been something thrown. You know.
Get a picture of that. You won. Throwing the rocks. Get a picture throwing the rocks. Go on.
Then it got to be a debate about what are they going to do. Among the protesters, what are we going to do? Are we going to be run out of the park? Are we going to be? And there were just contrary voices. You know, we don't want a confrontation in the park. We don't want to engage the police that way. And others were saying we have to do this in order to make the protest real.
This is a nonviolent march. That so far we are only on the sidewalk.
Then suddenly they crossed the street en masse. Here, they entered where people are supposed to be allowed to be on the sidewalks and so forth, in just ordinary foot traffic. And then suddenly they just burst out on all sides and started clubbing wildly. And they were hitting anyone who was in the way. Just the fact that you had the nerve to be there was, in some ways, made you a target.
Chicago has become a concentration camp, and it is clear for everybody to see.
Some of the delegates and other people attending the Democratic National Convention were well aware of what was going on. Clearly, there was news coverage of what was happening outside the convention center. People could see the police rushing into the streets. They could see the demonstrators being clubbed. And
I look at the confusion in this hall and watch on television the turmoil and violence that is competing with this great convention for the attention of the American people. And with George McGovern as President of the United States, we wouldn't have to have Gestapo tactics in the streets of Chicago.
Right on the convention floor, you saw what Daley's view was when Abraham Ribicoff, the senator from Connecticut, was upset about the beatings of us in the street. Mayor Daley accused him of being a Jewish this or that. It was seriously bad.
Police action both nights at Lincoln Park, with one single exception, I felt was highly disciplined. They acted with restraint. I thought they did a highly professional job.
In the heat of emotion and riot, some policemen may have overacted, but to judge the entire police department by the alleged action of a few would be just as unfair as to judge our entire younger generation by the action of this mob. I would like to say here and now that this administration, our administration, and the people of Chicago have never and will condone brutality at any time, but they will never permit a lawless, violent group of terrorists to menace the lives of millions of people, destroy the purpose of this national convention, and take over the streets of Chicago.
The presentation amounted to a film version of the written report on the Chicago disturbances put together last week by Mayor Daley's staff. And many of the same points were made, that the demonstrations were planned and carried out by radicals and revolutionaries bent on destroying not only the Democratic Convention, but the American social order.